In this video, we're going to be adding onto our slimes and establishing a consistent game state so that when a player defeats a slime, and then the player enters the cave and then returns to the previous level, the defeated slime isn't going to reappear again. So let's get started by creating a new autoload script, and we're going to call this our game state. Let's open that up, and before we do anything, let's just go in and add, this is a global. So let's find our script, let's add it. And in here, we can get rid of all of this default code. We're going to create a variable, just call it defeated enemies, which is going to be a dictionary. We'll default it to an empty dictionary. So we're going to be storing enemy IDs and their defeated status inside of this dictionary. This isn't going to be our final save and load system, but this is just going to get us started so we can have some sort of game state management now. In a future video though, we will go through a proper save and load system. But for now, let's just create two more methods in this autoload. So we need to check if an enemy is defeated. We're going to get an enemy ID, which is a string, and it's going to return a bool. And all we're going to do here is return our defeated enemies. We're going to get the enemy ID, pass in false. So that's going to be our default of false if we can't get the enemy ID. Otherwise, we're going to also mark enemy as defeated, which also gets an enemy ID, which is a string. This does not return anything. And all we're going to do is access our defeated enemies dictionary, give it the enemy ID, and mark it as true. So to make this work, we're going to have to go back into our enemy script and make a couple of small updates. So let's open that up. Actually, you can just go check out the script attached to our slime. And we're going to add one more export variable, and that is going to be our enemy ID, which is also a string. This is going to be its unique identifier for persistence. And now in our ready method, before we do the current health, we need to check if the enemy has been defeated. So we're going to go into our game state and we're going to check for is enemy defeated, pass in the enemy ID, and if it's defeated, we're going to queue free, and then we return. And now I also want to make our slimes a little bit more interesting. So right now we just have the purple slime. I want to have a way for us to be able to select a bunch of different colors or even potentially randomize them down the road. For us to do this, we're actually going to create a specific slime class. So let's go ahead and detach the script from our slime here, and then we can go ahead and attach a script. We're going to call it slime.gd. And so in here, let's get rid of all of this. We're going to give this a class name of slime, and we're going to extend our enemy. So now by doing this, we're getting everything that we have inside of the enemy class, but we're going to add some extra stuff to this for our slimes. So I went ahead and added a bunch of new assets for our slimes. So inside of the assets folder, slimes, we have a bunch of different colors of slimes. And what we're going to do is create an enum for our slime color. And then we are also going to have a constant for our slime textures. I'm going to copy and paste this in just because it is going to be a lot of repeat text, but feel free to pause the video and match this. So what we're doing here is we're giving all of the colors that we're going to use inside of our slime color enum, and then we're just preloading the assets inside of our slime texture. So that now we can add an export variable of our slime color. It's going to be equal to a slime color, and we're just going to give it the default, which is going to be our purple. We're going to make this a setter as well. So we can set on the value. We're going to do slime color equal to the value. Then if sprite, we're going to update sprite texture, which is a method that we're going to create right after we update our ready method. So let's go ahead and first do our ready method. In the ready method, we just want to super. We want to take everything from the enemy class and still make sure that that's all applied. And then we're also going to update our sprite texture. And inside of update sprite texture. We're not going to return anything, and all we're going to do is get the sprite.texture. It's going to equal the slime textures dot get, pass in the slime color export variable, and then if we don't get anything, we're going to go to our slime textures, and then we're just going to select slime color default. So the nice thing about what we're doing here is, since we've already built out the slime's animations and everything, and these are the same sprites just in different colors, we can just sub out that specific texture or that sprite sheet for a new one, so that all we're really doing is just choosing the color. So let's go into our test level and let's show you how this can work. So right now we have our purple slime here. Now when I click into the slime, we can choose this default here. We can choose dark blue, orange. We're not going to see any changes in the test level right now because our default is purple. But now when we go to play, we go over to our slime, we got an orange one now. Now we need to handle the actual ability for us to not see this slime again. So just to demonstrate right now, kill this slime, we go into the cave. When I go back, we still have this slime here. I don't want that to happen. So let's go into our level script, our base level script. And we're going to need to make one new method, which is going to be a func on enemy died. And we're going to give it an enemy of the type enemy. I'm just going to do if enemy.enemyId, game state. We want to mark it as dead or defeated and give the enemies enemy ID. And then right below the if our spawn points node, we're going to add where we actually handle the enemy persistence. So we're going to for child in get children. If child is enemy and not game state dot is enemy defeated, we give the child dot enemy ID. Child died, we're going to connect to that signal, connect, and then we are going to pass in on enemy died. And we don't want to have the parentheses, but we do want to pass in the variable. So we're going to do a bind and then pass in the child. We still need to do an elif here. So let's add elif, our child is enemy, and game state dot is enemy defeated, and give the child dot enemy ID. We're going to child, and we're going to Q3. Okay. So the last thing that we have to do is, since we export variabled our enemy ID, we need to actually assign that to our slime. So in here, let's just give this a slime1. And now when we play this, we can defeat the slime, go into the cave, and come back out, and we will not see the slime anymore. There we go. So now we have one other problem that we need to fix. When we Q-freed this slime, that's connected to our cave blocker and our cave entry blocker. So now I can't open this. This wasn't permanently removed. So we are going to want to go back into our level script. This is going to be our test level script. And we're going to add a check here for if is instance valid. We pass in our slime. And we just indent this connecting to this signal. And then if we have already defeated the slime, we want to remove the blocker. So we go back into our game state, is enemy defeated, give it our slime and its enemy ID. And then we get our cave entry blocker and we Q free. So now our cave should be fully open for us once we defeat this first slime. All right, there we go. We added a little bit of flavor to our slimes, and we made our game persist over various states on our after we transition through different scenes. Now I want to move into actually setting up items that we can collect. So let's go in and create a new folder. I'm just going to collapse this. Let's add a new folder. We'll call this items, and let's create a new script inside of here called item configs. can open this up. We're going to have this extend a resource. Can get rid of all this code. And then we're also going to want to create a new script for our base item class, which we're just going to call item.gd. So let's go in here, call this class name of item. And it is also going to extend a resource. And we're just going to have an enum of item type. This is going to help set us up for in the future. Right now, we are just going to have a consumable and a weapon. And we're going to have a bunch of basic item properties that we're going to set up as export variables. So we're going to have an ID, which is a string, an export variable for the name, have a variable for the icon, which is going to be a texture 2D. We're going to have a description, which is a string, and this equals sign up here should be a colon. Let's have another export variable for stackable, which is a bool, and we'll default this to false. So how many, or if can we stack multiple potions? And then on that note, we need another export variable for max stack size. So if we're stackable, how many can we stack? We're going to default that to 1 though. Then we have another export variable for our item type, which is of the type item type. Export variable for damage, which is an integer. We will default to 0. And then lastly, the export variable of use animation prefix, which will be a string, and we'll have it equal to an empty string. Let's go back to our item configs and let's finish this out. So we're going to want a constant for item configs, and this is going to be equal to, we're going to first create a health potion. And then inside of that, we're going to have a scale, which is going to be vector 2 and 0.5 by 0.5. So I found with using the health potion image that I have, it looked really big and out of place. So we're just going to scale this back by half of its original size. And then we're also going to give a heal amount of 5. This should be in quotes, then we will not get any errors now. You can come back and expand on this with every dictionary here, or every entry here. We'll be able to do this for any unique items that we're going to be creating. We're also going to have a static function here for getConfig, where we pass in the item ID, which is a string. We'll return a dictionary. And all we're going to do in here is return our item configs. We're going to get at the item ID. Otherwise, it's an empty dictionary. So again, this is just going to return the specific configuration for a specific item type. Now we need to actually create our inventory. So let's create a new folder. Let's call this inventory. We're going to create a new scene. It can just be a regular node, and we're going to call this inventory. Let's attach a script to this. We're going to give it a class name of inventory. It's going to have one signal of inventory changed. We're going to have an export variable for max slots. It's going to be an integer. We're going to default to 10. We'll change this as we go on, but right now we're only going to allow 10 slots of items at any given time inside of our inventory. Now we're going to create a variable for our items, which is an array of dictionaries, and we'll default this to an empty array. We're going to need 5 methods inside of here. We're going to need our ready method. We're going to need a method called addItem, which will take in an item of the type item, and then quantity, which is an integer, and we're going to default this to 1. And this will return a bool. And we're going to have hasItem, give an item ID, string. This is also going to be a bool. We're going to have removeItem, which we give an item ID, a string. Again, we need a quantity, which is an integer, can default to 1. This will also be a bool. And lastly, we have getItem, which we need an item ID, which is a string, and we are going to return an item. So in our ready, we need to initialize these empty inventory slots. So we're going to do for I in our range, of max slots. We're going to do items. We're going to append inside of a dictionary. We're going to do item null, give it quantity of 0. And that's all we're going to have to do there. In add item, we're going to attempt to add an item to the inventory, and we return true if successful or false if the inventory is full. So the first thing we're going to do is check if the item is stackable. If it is, we're going to do for slot in items, if slot.item and slot.item.id equals our item.id and our slot quantity is less than the item.max stack size, we need to calculate our space left, which is going to equal to an item max stack size minus the slot's quantity. We need to find the amount to add, which is going to be the smaller, so min of the quantity and the space left. Then we do our slot quantity plus equals the amount to add, and then quantity minus equals the amount to add. Last thing we do is if our quantity is 0, we want to admit inventory changed. Return true. And I need to spell quantity right. So the next thing we're going to do is outside of that if statement, we're going to check for slot in items. If not, slot.item, slot.item is going to equal the item. Slot.quantity is going to equal the min of the quantity or the item.max stack size. Let's omit the signal. We return true. And then if none of those things can return true, we're just going to return false. In has item, I'm going to loop through our items. So for our slot in items, if our slot.item and slot.item ID is equal to our item ID, we return true. Otherwise, we return false. And in remove item, we're going to attempt to remove an item from the inventory. And again, if it's successful, we return true. If it's not, or the quantity is not correct, we're going to return false. So we have to loop through the items again. So for slot in items, if slot.item and slot.item ID is equal to the item ID that we're passing in, if slot.quantity is greater than or equal to the quantity, slot.quantity minus equals the quantity, and if the slot quantity is equal to 0, slot.item is now going to be equal to null. So if there's no more in that stack, we're going to reset that slot to be a null. We still need to emit our inventory change signal, and then we would consider this to be true since that was successful. And then in get item, we're going to loop through our items. So for slot in items, if slot.item and slot.item.id is equal to item ID, we just return the slot.item. Otherwise, we're going to return null. And I think I might have misspelled this up here. Yeah, this should be item.id. Let me make sure I didn't do that anywhere else. I think we're good here. Now we need to create the item pickup scene so we can actually start using these inside of our games. So we need a way that we can place these items inside of our game, and we're going to use that through what we're going to call the item pickup. So we're going to create a new area 2D node. It's going to have a sprite, and it's going to have a collision shape. Let's rename this. We're going to call this our item pickup. Let's save it into our items folder, and let's attach a script to it. Give this a class name of item pickup. And we're going to have the onReadies for our sprite and collision shape. Let's just get rid of the underscore 2D after these. We're going to have two export variables of item, be of the type item, and an export variable of the quantity, which we are going to default to 1. And we need one constant, which is going to be our item config. and we're going to preload the item config script. I guess we call it item configs. And in our ready method, what we're going to do here is we need to configure the pickup's appearance and collision based on the item we're passing in. So we haven't actually made the health potion resource yet. We're going to do that after this, but we want to first, we don't have an item. We're going to print an error. Item pickup, no item resource found. Return. We don't have a sprite. Let's print an error. Item pickup, no sprite node found. We'll return. Otherwise, the sprite.texture is going to equal the item.icon. We're going to get our config, which is going to be equal to the item config. We're going to get config and then pass in our item ID. I'm going to check if the config has scale, which our health potion does. We're going to do sprite.scale is going to equal our config.scale. And our collision shape scale is going to equal config.scale. And then we need to create one method on a signal. So we're going to go into our area 2D, the main node, go to the signals, and we're going to do onBodyEntered. And before we can do that, we do need to attach the item pickup script to item pickup. And now we can do onBodyEntered. And all we're going to do here, we're going to check if the body is our character. And if it is, we're going to look for its inventory. We do body get node. See if it's called inventory. If inventory and inventory dot add item. We give it our item and quantity. We queue free. Whoops. There we go. So all we're doing here is we're getting the inventory node, which we need to assign to our character. And then if we get that and we can add this item, so this will return true or false, then we'll queue free. So we're going to remove that item from our level if we are able to add it. If not, it just stays there and nothing happens. So let's go set this up before we create our health potion resource. We're going to go back to our character. So let's open up that scene. And we need to add a new inventory node. So let's go find our inventory scene. We can just drag it right into the character scene. And if we go to our test level, go to the 2D, I'm just going to add a random potion here. So we need to just grab this item pickup. We can just drag it here. Nothing happens here because we don't have any items that we can load. So inside of our items, let's make a new folder. I'm just going to call it health potion. And inside of that, we need to create a new resource. We can call this health potion for the resource. And let's open this up. So in this script, we need to attach our item script. And now we get all of these properties. So ID, let's just give this health potion 1. Name is going to be health potion. The icon, we're going to do an atlas texture. Let's open this up, go into our assets. In items, I have a health potion.png. If we add this here, just edit the region and you can choose which one you want. We could have made this is an animated health potion, which we could have done, but for now, let's just set this up like that. In the description, we'll just call heals character by 1 HP. Or we do 5 HP, we'll call it 5 HP. We're going to mark it as stackable. We're going to allow a stack size of 5. It's a consumable, it doesn't do any damage, and there is no animation prefix. Okay, and now that we've made the potion resource, we need to actually assign it to the item pickup. So if we go in here, we can quick load this since we only have one. Now we have the health potion. And let's see if we can see this. There we go. We can see this now. We aren't getting the collision shape and it isn't scaling appropriately. So we need to add a collision shape manually to our item pickup. We're just going to make this a circle shape. We also need to go into our item pickup, and this is going to be a crucial point for the collisions to actually work. We need the mask to be on our player, but more importantly, we're going to set layer 3, which is going to be our item layer. So if you don't have this, make sure that you add layer 3 to be our items layer. Well, the player layer is actually 5. Sorry about that. Okay, so I was able to collect the potion, but the scale still wasn't right to me. So let's try and debug that real quick. I think the reason that the collision shape isn't working is because in the name here, I put health potion 1, which I'm not sure why I put the 1 there, but we don't need that because in our item configs, that's what we're looking for here, this health potion 1. And that's how we're going to get our heal amount and our scale amount. So when we play this now, there we go. The collision shape is still big, but the actual potion is much smaller. I think instead of trying to do this individually, let's just actually set the scale on the entirety of the item pickup. There we go. That's a lot better. So I think that'll about wrap up this video. In the next video, we're going to work on a little bit of the inventory UI so we can actually see what we're holding, as well as allowing us to use the health potions.